Hello and welcome to Meet Your Inspiration podcast with Mary and Rich. Today we are at Hampstead House to record another inspirational video where we're going to talk about wills, probate, determination and success. Today our guest is Scott Walker and we are very pleased to welcome you to our podcast and thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Scott, how
Thank
are
you
you
very
doing?
much. I'm very well, thank you. Thank you. Yes, it's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me onto the podcast.
I'm going to say something interesting. How we find Scott was very interesting. One of his posts we come across on LinkedIn, and this is how we reached to him. He was absolutely amazing in his response. He found time to meet us, and today we are here to record this amazing interview. I'll leave Richard to say a bit more about what we found and how we get to Scott.
Yeah, it was really exciting, and the thing is, it's the power of social media, and it's the power of being able to use LinkedIn to reach out to people. And once you find something really inspirational, really exciting, then it stands out. And Scott, working in law as well for wills, in terms of, and it's something that we all need to consider, and also the process of moving from wills, and if someone dies and then it goes into probate. And I was thinking, wow, this is really fascinating. So to reach out to Scott, and he was so willing to come back and to share with us, and it's such a powerful story and something that we're really excited about to share. So Scott, thank you very much. So let's start. How did your journey start? How did you get into law in the first place and become a solicitor?
Yes, it was a long journey, that's for sure. And I can't quite believe how long it's been. We were just talking actually before the start of the podcast about how long I've been in the law, which it started in 2000, so 24 years ago, so a long time ago. And as I say, it has been a very long journey. So I should perhaps go right back to the beginning and start right back to my school days. So I followed the normal route. So I did my GCSEs. I then decided to go to college. But at that point, I'd actually decided I'm not sure whether A levels were quite the right route. I just felt at the time there was a lot of pressure to do exams. So I decided to do a GMVQ.
Okay.
And that was in business. And part of that GMVQ, so there was a module called Business and the Law. And that was my first exposure to studying law. And I didn't know at the time that I'd actually go on and study law at degree level and qualify as a solicitor. So after college, I decided, originally I wanted to go to university. Really, it was a dream of mine. I'm the first I'm one of 6 siblings, so I'm the first out of all of us to go to university. Although some of my other brothers and sisters actually went to university as well. But again, I found after college that going to university was a really big step and it just didn't feel quite right. So I took the decision to go into full-time employment.
Instead of going to university?
It was quite a decision. Reflecting on it, it feels quite an insightful step to take, because I wanted to go to university, but there was something inside me thinking, I'm not quite sure I've got the confidence. Absolutely, yeah.
And what
absolutely.
kind of employment you get into?
So I started at McDonald's,
Okay.
believe it or not. So my first full-time job outside of doing paper rounds and the usual things we would do when we were younger. So that was my first proper job, if you like. And yeah, I've got to be honest, it was quite an interesting experience. Just saying that, I reminded myself that I often have a recurring dream about working in McDonald's. Not quite sure what that means, but But
Burger construction. But
yes,
that's the first introduction into teamwork, because I mean in McDonald's it is absolutely a well-oiled machine, isn't it? I mean the first thing everyone does is everyone's got a task, and the whole place works around all the people around making the whole thing work.
On a high pressure, I assume.
Yeah.
Especially depends where, but some McDonald's are really, really busy. So the pressure that people got there is wow.
absolutely. And that's a really good point. And it was very high pressured. You know,
How long you've
Good.
been there? How long you spent in that?
so I was in McDonald's. Gosh, how long? So I started. Oh, this is going to make me think. It probably a good couple of years,
Okay.
I suspect. And so initially started when I was at college. So I started part time and then left college, went full time. So it was a few years, and then I started to explore other avenues. So I looked into office work. Eventually, got a job as a office assistant, as they were known back then, or administration assistant for a local manufacturing company. Well, would you call it manufacturing? They supplied damp proofing and timber treatments.
Okay.
So it was quite again an interesting environment to start my office work in.
Was that a big team? How many people were in the team then?
It was quite a big company. So I was in Derby at the time, where I'm originally from. So a medium-sized team. So there was probably a dozen or so, and then a team of surveyors and the employees who actually did the treatments and the work, who we would look after. So again, it was very much a team experience and being exposed to different processes and ways of working and building upon the customer service experience. And that carried on really. So I continued working mainly within an accounting function. So I did a lot of credit control work, and as well as doing general office administration work. I ventured out into call centre work at one point. So there were, again, lots of new experiences, which
lots of new skills,
looking back,
and communication skills as well. Everything was around communication at that point as well, wasn't it? Which later on becomes even more important, because those core skills of learning and communicating with the people around you is a critical point, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, when I think about it, it's very much so. And I was always learning, and I didn't realise at the time how much that experience would serve me in the legal sector, and what I'm doing now, and when I was studying. So fantastic.
So you carry on that, and how you find, obviously you will start to explore different back in the time you didn't know what you want to do. Once you're in that environment, did it come clear if this is what you like, or when it comes the passion for law?
So what happened was I actually had a bad relationship breakdown, and that led to me really considering what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until then that I'd actually thought about it. I think I realised that what I was doing in office environment was great experience, but I knew I wanted to perhaps do more and explore the world. And the breakup with my relationship at the time, that actually gave me the push to start to decide, actually, I'm going to do something here, and I'm going to go back to university. So that's when I made the decision. Now's the time. I'm going to go back into full-time education. So before that, I did an A-level part-time. So because I did a GMVQ, I needed an extra qualification to satisfy the entry requirements
to get into
university. Yeah, absolutely. And I chose law. And I was just trying to think then what led me to the law, and I can't quite pinpoint why. I suspect it was because I studied business and the law during my GMVQ. So there was something in me which sparked that interest. I also suspect it was as a result of the television program This Life. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So it's a program, a 90s television program about a group of lawyers living together. And yes, I suspect that had some bearing on me wanting to go into law. But anyway, I did my A-level and I was working full time, studying part time. I just really enjoyed it. The subjects, all of the subjects you study when you do law are fascinating. You know, when you think about criminal law, you're dealing with family law, wills and probate law, what I do now.
Yeah.
And then you have commercial aspects, litigation.
Yeah.
It's really varied and really interested, and you're learning about the English legal system as well, and that sparked something in me. So finished my A-level, went to university, so that was in 2001. I did a law degree, so studied straight law.
And is that over every single law in the country? I mean, how far does it go? Because obviously, I mean, law, as you just said, I mean, it covers so much, and it must be if you saw a book with all the laws of the country. I mean, I can't imagine how thick it would be, but it must be incredibly thick. And also, obviously, it's not just the law, but it's all the different individual cases and the results of those individual cases, which all build up the law process. Because that's the history, isn't it, of law then?
That's a great question, actually, because you study certain core subjects, and it's usually criminal law, about the English legal system, contract law, tort law, and then a European law was another one which springs to mind. So there's lots of core aspects to it. All of those involve cases. So about any area of law that you study in, there are a lot of cases to get your head around. There's the legislation as well. So it's quite intense and quite in depth. So you do learn a lot. And then you can start to branch out into other areas. So your traditional options when you're at university. And I actually did the law of succession, which is the law surrounding wills.
Okay.
And I think that was my start into what I do now. I do now.
Tell us a bit more about what was that post on LinkedIn about, because it's exactly on that time of your development learning, isn't it? Just let's let the audience know a bit more about that.
Of course, yeah. So that post, the post I did on LinkedIn was my story after my degree. And how I eventually qualified as a solicitor. So I finished my degree. You then go on to law school, if you like, and do a postgraduate diploma in legal practice. And after that, you then have to do a 2-year period of training. I should say that has changed now. So in recent years, how you can qualify as a solicitor has changed quite significantly, but at that time I had to do a 2-year period of training. And so I was at law school. I funded that myself. I was working full time, studying that part time. It was a great experience. Again, studying the law is, because it's so fascinating. You meet lots of people. You're getting experience of what it's eventually going to be like in practice. And I was about halfway through my legal diploma course. It's called the legal practice course. And as I said, I was working full time, and I was, one particular day at work, I was sat in a meeting with my manager and my supervisor. And they knew very well that I was studying law. I was wanting to eventually qualify as a solicitor and work in the law. And I can't really remember what we were talking about. I just remember being sat in a meeting, which is not my most comfortable environment, particularly when it's with managers. But there was a comment made by my manager at the time that I wouldn't make it in law, and it really. Oh, in all honesty, it was quite devastating, and I think
I'm sure
because it was more to do with the fact that I'd spent thousands of pounds on the legal practice course,
and the time, and the
absolutely,
effort, everything you put into it.
And instead
Absolutely.
of encouragement, you get
The negative, which is what you don't want.
So how you managed to go through that? Because this is quite important.
Thinking back, I don't think the comment was necessarily meant. There was no malice in the comment. I don't think. I think it was perhaps a warning, but it did affect me at the time. But what I know now is that it did push me to move forward
and to prove that you're going to make it.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And so after that, I continued studying. But because there was, so at that time, law was very, very competitive. I mean, it still is. It's so difficult for anybody to get into law. I think that has changed because of some of the changes to how you qualify, which I mentioned earlier. But, there were a lot of people in the same boat. And I was doing what I needed to do. So I was applying for this period of training that I had to do after my legal practice course. I always had this kind of nagging feeling at the back of my mind about that comment and, what that might mean. But it did push me forward. I was making the applications. I was trying to show up. I was trying to make contacts. And I did have some success, and I consider myself really lucky because I did manage to secure legal roles. So I had a number of paralegaling roles. So paralegal is someone who works within a law firm. That there may be people who, like me, had completed the legal academic side of the training, but they wanted to gain experience.
So they're working in the background behind a sort of a more senior solicitor or lawyer sitting at a slightly higher level, but doing the background research work, I guess. Is that more paralegal?
Yeah, absolutely.
The first step, I would say, in that business or in that area.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. It was and is a stepping stone. Now, again, it was experience, a chance for me to build up some practical experience, meet with clients. So it was, again, it was a great time. There was still a long gap before I'd managed to secure my training period that I needed to do. And so I was still making countless applications, rejection after rejection, and that was really difficult.
Were the rejections just like now when people apply for job and you just thank you very much, just were there any particular reasons for rejection, or it was just the usual one that thank you very much, but not at this point? Or does anyone come back because you don't have A, B, or C, or some reasons, or no, just the usual rejections?
Yeah, it was the usual rejections, and you would often find that people wouldn't give you a reason. I remember once managing to secure an interview with quite a large firm and going to the first stage of the interview process. And even then, there was no kind of feedback as to, what went wrong and
what was good, what was bad. Yeah,
exactly.
Which is what you want.
Exactly.
I mean, you want the feedback, really.
Absolutely.
That's how you develop.
Especially this is still, I'm not losing it. This is the beginning when you want to get to the training first. So I assume they shouldn't have far too much expectations. It's a bit more someone to open the door for you and to lend a hand to help you to get into law, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Because this was the beginning of the training period. So, you were very much looking for someone who was prepared to take the chance, or they saw something in you, which.
But they don't give themselves and you a chance to go and see them and sit with them and show who you are.
Absolutely.
So at some point you manage, I believe. Someone
Yes.
appeared there.
Yes, absolutely. So after I think it was about 7 years in total. So I was
Wow.
So since finishing law school, there was a 7-year period. So I'd managed, as I say, to have some experience within a law firm, but then eventually, through a friend, interestingly, somebody who I met at university, mentioned that her firm, she'd actually trained at the firm that I went on to qualify with, and she mentioned that they were looking for a trainee.
Perfect.
And that's how it all started. And they took a chance on me, and we met a few times, and that was here in Kent, in Faversham.
Wow.
The
Excellent.
power of communication and the people around us, isn't it?
Yeah, it comes down to that.
You
again.
meet someone and you never know what
our networking abilities. You never know what's going to come out of it.
Back in the time, network.
Yeah. It's the same.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah. And I was so grateful for that opportunity, and it was a great firm. It was a high street firm, so they did the areas of law that I wanted to do, and was in probate, which I do now. And such fantastic people and great people to train with. They really did. They really gave me the skills and the knowledge to go out and practice law.
Did you find the people working around you in the office were sort of able to because you come in obviously and it's such a vast thing, and sort of like how although you learn the processes, I'm sure you must have understood all the processes because you wouldn't have got to that point, but then sort of like making sure that you're pushing the right button and sort of making sure everything works out. I guess that the team must have been really helpful to empower you and give you the opportunities, and when you got a question, how they structure it to help you to get the next level, because we all need an encourager to get us through, particularly in a situation like that, because it's in law, it's very much about confidence and knowing the next step, and that must have been quite daunting at times, I guess.
It certainly was, and yes, you're right. You would have a level of supervision, so people were mentoring you. And they would give you that encouragement, they would give you that support and the experience to to be able to go off and do it yourself. So that was really big part of it, and the ability and the experience to deal with clients, because a lot of the areas of law that a high street firm would do, for example, and the area of law that I practice in now, it is very people based. Again, it's that customer service aspect. It's dealing with clients in, for what I do, quite difficult times of their life, and I think that.
So was that company particularly focused on wills and probate, or were they involved in family law at the same time as well? Were they sort of covering a lot? Because it being a high street legal firm, I guess it would be cover a huge base.
Yeah, absolutely. So certainly wills and probate law was an area they specialised in and did a lot of work in. Family law was the other, and conveyancing.
Yeah. So
it was all the kind of everyday legal transactions that most people at some point in their life will need. And then they did commercial areas as well and litigation.
Okay.
So I certainly managed to get a broad range of experience in different
all
areas
those areas
of the law
as well, which is good.
But back then, did you know already where you want to specialize, or not yet? That was the time when you were taking your decision.
I did know at that time. I knew pretty much. I started the legal practice course, so law school. I knew then that I really wanted to do wills and probate law, and I think that was because I'd studied the law of wills at university, so that my
One
interest
lends
was
to
just
another
sparked. And I was really lucky to have experience in wills and probate when I was working for firms before being able to qualify. And then when I was working for the firm in Faversham, a high street firm, I was able to build upon my wills and probate experience. It was there in me quite early on, and it's
Obviously,
fascinating.
from all this, sounds like it comes to you a bit later, but when you were ready, you get to the university, you finish your education. What was keeping you to not give up all these 7 years, although you had these little jobs that you find are legal ones? But obviously, with this rejection, sometimes people start to lose the belief. What kept you, because this is not a year or two, this is quite a long period, what kept you on toes and being so determined to success?
I think it was just the fact that I'd made the decision that I wanted to be a solicitor. And that went back right to university. But that was my only goal. So what I realise now is that I was working towards qualifying, and that was my only goal. And I think that gave me the determination, because that's what I wanted to do. And I did have, I remember I had lots of opportunities when I was searching for that training period to be able to qualify. So, for example, I had a job interview once for a company who did legal education. And I actually got the job, but turned it down because I knew there was something inside me which knew this wasn't quite right.
That
so
wasn't
there was
the direction you really wanted to go.
And I think that was it. It was just sheer determination. I suspect part of it was also the fact that I had spent all this time and money studying. The comment from a manager at that,
I would say
that
probably
job.
for me, if I'm on your place, I think this comment will stay here, and I'll be like, whatever happened, I need to show you. Because I believe from today's point of view, you can say to that guy, thank you very much for that comment, because definitely drive me in a direction and help me, because sometimes we don't realize the things that happen around us. But if it's me, definitely this comment will be, I will show you. And I'm sure that you feel really proud once you get to that point, you finish the training and you get in the law world and will world. On your journey, did you have any role models, mentors, people who influence? It might be someone that you work with during your personal life, books, movies, I don't know. People got all different kind of influences. Who was yours?
There were a few people that do stick in my mind, and so there were mainly people I worked with. So that there was somebody I met through one of the jobs that I had as a paralegal at a law firm, Jo, who we're still friends now. Actually, she very much taught me a lot. I got a lot of experience from working with her. We were a small team at that particular job. We were a team of 3, and we were just doing wills, ironically. And so that was somebody who was I always felt was very supportive, learned a hell of a lot. And then after that, I think it was, I would have to say the partners in the firm where I trained at. So the firm of Tassels down in Faversham. So Anne and James, who were the owners of the firm, they really did instill the importance of client care within me, which I've carried on, and that's just stayed with me throughout my career. But it was a lot more than that. It was the encouragement and the ability to shadow them and learn from them, and just feeling like a family, which is a bit of a cliche to say,
but they cared. They showed a real care and a real support through, because obviously it is a tough journey, and it's not. And because there's a lot of pressure, isn't it? I mean, obviously, because law is so diverse, and as we've already said, it's just a massive thing. So, like, it's as much about research and how to find the next answers to those points, I guess, to sort of help that individual case to say, well, in this particular case, if we reference this, this, and this, these are the points. And if you go and have a look at that one, there's the one to look at. Here's another one to look at. Here's another one to look at. And it's having those pointers, isn't it? I guess on that direction.
Very much so. Absolutely, and you certainly find your research skills
accelerate quickly.
Gosh, yeah, and still today actually.
Because if you didn't have that, to be honest, I can imagine how easy it would be to fail. Because you're not knowing where to go, and you're thinking, which book do I pick up? Where am I going to find this? Where am I going to find that case? And you need someone just to give you the little pointers there. Because, and obviously with law, I guess the better your memory is, and the better you can remember certain cases and go, oh, well, I'll remember this case, I'll remember that case, and that experience. And in the early years, you won't have that, because not everyone's got a photographic memory to remember the whole of law. So, if you can't do that, you really need the ability to know exactly how to research, isn't it? So that must have been a real key.
Such a great point, and that was the reason I didn't do A-levels, because I didn't feel my memory was very good. So when it comes to doing exams, a lot of that was just regurgitating information.
Yes.
And I didn't feel I was good at that when I was doing my GCSEs. So, but what I found is you're right, actually, the pointers that you get from the people you work with are so important, because that leads you then into eventually the right path, the right answer, depending on what you're doing.
Sometimes it's a bit more the experience and exactly what you're doing through your day-to-day. Either it's apprenticeship or work, because we learn a lot once it's on a paper base, but it's much different when you put in action and you actually go, and probably they take you and you need to sit in a meeting, meet the customers. Here it is, that's the right time, how you see and copy what they do, how they react, what they say. And I think that's the best lessons, rather. Of course, I don't underestimate the other part, but having both together. If you go back, would you change anything that you've done?
I would say, and again, this is a bit of a cliche to say, but trust your inner guidance system. I believe that within you
what's best.
Exactly, and what path you really want to take. And I think it's just trusting yourself to believe. Trust in yourself to believe in yourself.
But how you build this confidence, how you build this belief, because when you are 18, 20, not everybody are lucky enough to have mentors or to have support from family, friends. If you don't have that, what do you think is best advice we can give about to build that belief in yourself?
I mean, from my experience, I would say, the advice I would give is get as much experience as you can, within whatever field it might be. The work experience I had during the early part of my career was and continues to be so valuable. I think that gives you the confidence and will naturally make you realise what you want to do and what you don't want.
It's like being practical, isn't it? And even a lot of people would think practical like, oh well, it's like woodwork or sort of physical things. But even when you're going into like law, you're still doing practical work and exercises, going through things, doing the research papers, following it through, and repeating that process. And I'd imagine as you do it, it becomes more and more interesting. If that's your focus and that is your interest, then you're gonna find all these cases and thinking, wow, that's amazing how that came out of that, because you might not have seen that pathway until you read that particular case and read another case which is probably similar, and then all of a sudden it becomes really fascinating. You go, oh, really? It gets well, and then you think, well, actually, and then maybe you probably think about ideas. Well, if you take that and that and that, maybe they could have done this. And then maybe you can steer the pathway a slightly different way. And almost you're creating your own case, which then becomes a reference later. I guess that would
Yes.
probably be a massive motivator to think, wow, I've actually got one of my cases and it's written down in this particular bit of law. Like, that would probably be quite an exciting, and that would be a huge motivator, I'd imagine, in the legal system.
It would, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's how you find your interest, I think. So, when you're doing, when you're looking at cases, for example, you do find what areas that you connect with, and that helps you when if you decide you wanted to go into law, it will help you work out, well, this is what I find interesting. This is what I can see myself doing and spending my professional life doing. You can hone in on your expertise by doing that. The other piece of advice, I've just something I was thinking about fairly recently. The other piece of advice I would give is take some time to just think about what it is you want and what goals you want. And the reason I say that is because I only discovered recently that when I eventually did qualify, I had this, so my ultimate goal was to qualify as a solicitor, and that's what I wanted to do. When I got there, I didn't have a clue what the next step was going to be. And it was because I hadn't really considered the next steps after attaining the goal. So taking the time, and eventually I did that only recently, another new journey for me over the last few years with how my career's gone. But I spent a bit of time just reflecting and considering what do I really want to do. So I think that can be important in the early stages if you are thinking about going into law.
So Scott, so you made this huge decision then to sort of focus on wills and probate. Now, I think all of us are very conscious that we all have something, and at some point our life is going to come to an end, and then there's the situation about what happens to what we have, which obviously is the whole purpose, as far as in a very basic form, of what a will is. So, but a lot of people today don't have a will, and they don't know why they really need it. So,
the importance of it's going to be good, to talk about, to give us a little bit more information about the importance of the will, the impact that got, and
what difference it makes as well.
Yeah.
And it's very important about how to write. Can we write alone, or we need just some specific key bits, because I think they're going to be quite good for the audience and for us as well.
You're absolutely right. Lots of people don't make wills, and I think the statistics hover around the 60% mark of the adult population who die without a will. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. I think there's perhaps necessarily having an understanding of why it's important. And I would say, firstly, it is about making sure that you are let's say your assets. So, whether that's your home, whether that's your business, if you have one, or whatever possessions and money you have, but also your loved ones, and making sure that your assets go to who you want them to go to. And that's one of the, there are lots of reasons why wills are important, but it is one of the key reasons, because we do have in English law a backup system. I think backup's probably the wrong word, but we have rules which say this is what happens when you die if you don't have a will. The problem with that is it won't suit everybody. And, I would say probably nine times out of 10, it won't suit you. It's taken away your ability to choose and make sure that the right people are inheriting from you. A good example, partners. So if you're not married or in a civil partnership and you are cohabiting, you have a partner for many years, then they won't receive anything from you unless you have a will, because the rules that we do have, which say what happens when you die and you don't have a will, don't cater for people who are unmarried or not in a civil partnership.
So what happens with that? Does it go to next of kin? Is that the legal process to next of kin? Which in that case, I guess if you didn't have you didn't have a partner, or you were you had a partner, but there was no legal binding between you. So then either if you have any previous dependents, or I guess then it becomes either your brothers, sisters, or your parents, I guess, if your parents are still alive. So that those are the sort of next of kin sort of. Is that how it resolves?
Yeah, it does. It does. It usually follows next to kin. So if you have children, it would go to your children. So if you're unmarried or not in a civil partnership and you have children, it would pass down to the children. But if you don't, it goes to parents first of all, if they're still alive, then to brothers and sisters, and then to for other distant relatives. So it does include uncles and aunts. It could include nephews and nieces and cousins if you get that far.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it does depend on if there are surviving members in a particular category. So it follows a set order.
Yeah.
But if you have no relations in that particular category, it then go down to the next.
And then what happens then if it's an older person and they die and then they don't have any, or there's no, either there probably is next of kin, but they might be untraceable next of kin, because that must be happened quite a few times. If someone, particularly if you've moved maybe into England and you come from overseas and then you have no immediate dependents and no one knows the source, I presume then whatever's left goes to the state. Does that go to, so the taxman effectively gets it?
Yeah, so eventually, if there are no surviving relatives, it will go to the Crown, as we say. So it will go to the state.
Yeah.
Usually, what would happen? So you would, if you had somebody and you were unable to trace relatives, you would have to make some attempt to trace if there were any surviving relatives. So you're doing a family tree, and usually in that situation, you would ask a genealogist to do some research and find out the family tree, basically. So
and that's a whole level, and a whole another level, and huge amount of work and research, which I guess needs to be paid for as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That had a big cost to do that kind of research, because it's a lot of time and effort.
It does, yeah, absolutely. It's a really good point, and you need to factor in, the cost side and how that's going to impact upon your estate. But also it's in some cases you could have hundreds of beneficiaries. I have had situations where you have had that many beneficiaries in an estate. So the time and the work and the costs involved in dealing with the estate and eventually getting to the point where you can distribute it to everybody.
There's probably not much left over to each individual.
Exactly.
You get a check for £5.
That's true.
If you write a will, does it obviously unchanged, or there is some period of time that you need to revise and do something? Does it? Obviously, if something changes in the circumstances, let's say, probably you have to change it. But other than that, do you need to go and revise after a certain amount of time, or no? You just write one and it stay, unless you change your mind to change the beneficiaries. Yes.
I normally recommend review your will if you have one every couple of years. I think realistically, you may not need to change it, but it's always good to keep it in mind. So just in case your circumstances have changed. So, usually you would say if a significant life event has happened, you may want to think about changing your will. So it could be that you've had a new child. It could be that a relation has passed away. It might be that you've inherited from your parents or from a relative. It might be that you've had a family dispute with somebody, and you want to reconsider who the beneficiaries in your will are. It might be that you've divorced or you've had a relationship breakdown.
Or married.
It could be. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good one. Getting married or entering into a civil partnership is a good time to make a will. And it reminded me actually that if you have a will in place and you marry or enter into a civil partnership, then that will be invalidated. So that's a situation where you do need to change and do a new one.
And is it the same the other way around? If a relationship breaks apart and someone gets divorced, does that invalidate the previous will as well?
It's slightly different with divorce or dissolving a civil partnership. So the will still be valid, but your former spouse or civil partner, if they are mentioned in the will that you have, they won't receive that gift in the will. So it's classed as if they had died before you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also the same if they were appointed as an executor. So the people who are going to deal with the will and deal with the estate, then they wouldn't be able to be an executor. But the will still remains valid. So that's useful from a divorce or
from a guidance point of view.
Yeah. But again, different if you're just cohabiting. So, that's, I think, again, when you are unmarried, not in a civil partnership, that's when there can be difficulties and lots of things to be aware of.
So it sounds like it's quite important.
Really important.
Sounds like, obviously, after we met you first time and I had the opportunity to speak with quite a few people about that, I would say 8 out of 10, they don't have will. And they don't think about that in terms of the importance of it. Because we all think like, oh yeah, it's just go on the chain and that's fine. I mean, but by the sounds of it and what we learned today is like, it's not that easy and probably we all need to have a think about it. What is the difference of the wills that you go and buy from stationery shops and the will that someone come to you and sit down with you and you help to write the will? What is the difference?
Yeah, so great point actually. So the main difference, and I think the key difference, is that you are getting advice. So if you're doing your will with a solicitor or other professional will writer or company, it gives you the opportunity to get legal advice about your own situation. So the will is actually going to be tailored for you. So wills that you can make yourself and that you can get from stationers, from W.H. Smith's, or even from Amazon, you can get DIY will packs.
Literally to download it, I guess, and then just fill it in and then upload it again.
Absolutely.
It's more basic, probably, if the situation is quite easy.
Yeah, they are. I think, and that's a good way of describing it. It is basic, but it's, I will say that a will isn't really an off-the-shelf product because it has to be tailored for you. Yes, we do have these options of writing wills ourselves, and the will writing industry has gone through enormous changes and lots of competition, lots of people doing wills, and you can get them online quite cheaply as well nowadays, and people will offer them as a really cheap service. But again, that misses the opportunity to, as I say, to really get into the detail about your own situation, get advice which is tailored for you, because for anybody, there will be part of what you're doing and part of the reasons why you're making a will. There will be something within that detail which means that you need to consider this, or you might want to think about doing this. And the only way you're going to know that is by sitting down with a professional.
And I guess it changes as well, doesn't it, as you go through your life? So if you're like a typical family, and I'm just going to use a very stereotypical, so there's the husband and the wife and 2 children. So if they write a very basic, simple will, then if the mother dies, it's left to the father. If the father dies, it's left to the mother, and the dependents will then automatically, will be right. Well, if anything then happens to them, then they become, and then there might be things. Well, we've decided that like our son, he really likes the car, so he can have the car, and the daughter likes some, mum's jewelry, so she can have mum's jewelry, and then the rest of it is just split out. So that might be a very basic will, and a very simple. The husband and wife are both in jobs, they're both just working normally, but so that would be a fairly simple process. But then you might have a family which is a much larger family, and they might have maybe one or two businesses within within the family, and then the amount of money involved could be significantly larger, possibly. So then it's leaving money to family, but they may also decide they want to support a particular charity, or there might be certain family members who they want to support because they're on a journey and they've sort of seen, well, our nephew over there, he's such a nice lad and he's doing this and whatever, so we decided to leave them something. So that's where it becomes much more complicated. And obviously you need advice. And also when big numbers come in, I guess there's also the situation about how it's affected for tax and capital gains tax. Because obviously now, not everybody, obviously the number of people in that situation is less, but obviously if there's a big number involved, then you have to consider, well, if you leave that amount of money to them, then that would be fine. But if you left that, then they would have other consequences. And that is an area where obviously for you, it's a big level of advice, isn't it?
It is, yeah, absolutely. I mean, tax is such a key part of it. A lot of people, if will want to know, is my estate going to be taxable, whether that's inheritance tax or capital gains tax, as you mentioned. So, and for people who do have larger estates, and they could have quite valuable assets, business interests, you mentioned, there is a lot to unpack within that. As I say, thinking about tax, but also, what's going to happen with the business? Can we make sure the business can continue to run if we want that to happen when we pass away? And, just making sure that you are structuring the will to take into account, what your wishes are, but also the individual beneficiary circumstances. So, there could be reasons why you don't want a particular beneficiary to have a large sum of money, for example. So it's, just thinking, well, what else can we do within the will? Can we put a trust in the will, for example? And interestingly, what I've realised probably only quite recently is that I think any will, even if you do have kind of a typical family setup you were talking about earlier, I think sometimes even that there's things that you might want to consider which you might not have. Yeah, that's a good way for explaining it. Fine tune. Yeah, no, that's a good way, because it might be that you're thinking about guardians, for example, if you've got young children, but also the executors, so the people who are going to be dealing with everything when you pass away. That is a key part of any will. It's a key decision to make, making sure you have the right people who can do that. So I've definitely come to realise most wills, that they can have their own complexities.
And I guess as well, something that's becomes more and more apparent today is also the situation on power of attorney. So if you're in a situation today, and a lot of people, particularly with older people, they get Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or something that mentally dissipates them, and it means then they're not able to make rational decisions. Now, obviously, at that point, somebody has to maybe make a decision, reference what happens going forward. So part of, I think, with having a will is also at that point you also set the power of attorney to a particular either loyal friend or family member who's going to be able to make a reasonable decision. So it might be like, so within a family there might be like a sister or a brother of the family is then given the ability to make the power of attorney. So then even if you've got in a husband and wife situation and they're both become unable to make rational decisions, that power of attorney and setting that is also must be a very important part of the will process, because I guess that must be something you do as well.
It is, yeah. Again, really important and absolutely part of making a will. So it's I almost see powers of attorney as an extension, because it is about making sure that if you do become ill, you've got people who can make those decisions. So yeah, equally as important to know. I tend to say, if you're making a will, it's a great opportunity to also make your powers of attorney, because you're already in that space of dealing with this, and we don't. generally we don't like to talk about us dying and what's going to happen if we become ill. So it's, if you can do them both at the same time, it makes you think about it, but it kind of reduces the anxiety and the difficulties of going through that process. So, but yeah,
did
absolutely.
I understand now right? All the wills, doesn't matter DIY or to solicitor, they've got the same power, strength, let's say, when it comes to time to use them, or if there is some key points that if they're missed, it's not going to be legal, or doesn't matter DIY or with solicitor, they always accept it and they're followed.
Excuse me, your point. So usually what I tend to find with DIY wills is that you can make, or people can make, errors when it comes to signing them. So which can then result in the will being invalid. So if there is a set process for signing and witnessing a will.
Obviously, so the person signed, and then has to be witnessed, and the witness, and obviously, I guess it's not just signing the witness, but it's also who that person is, where they are, the date it was signed. I mean, and if any one of those little points is missing, obviously, then I guess that invalidates the will.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are circumstances where you may find that the will is invalid. So it's certainly better to get professional advice wherever possible.
And I heard something which probably it's not right, but that DIY ones got a time limit. Is that right or no?
Not usually, no. So we wills will be valid
Until
forever.
Change or,
yeah, exactly. So usually if there's a change.
It's quite big area and definitely something people need to think about it. So do you want to give a little bit advice where people can find you? We know about LinkedIn. We've seen you do as well some courses. You try to let people know much more about that, but is there anywhere else they can find, or LinkedIn is the best place if someone want to reach to you?
I would say certainly LinkedIn is probably the best place. So if you search Scott Walker Solicitor, I usually come up quite easily. I'm also on YouTube. So that's another good place to find me. Lots of free video content and advice on there. So that's Scott Walker Solicitor again. The other place you can find me is on, so I work as a consultant solicitor at Richard Nelson Solicitors. So I will be on their website as well. So those are the three main ones you can find me.
Good, we will share them.
Can I just ask you one other question? And it's obviously once we go past the will situation and somebody dies, so the will is then read, and then this next process is called probate. So the will, and then when it goes into probate, can you just explain to people a little bit about what probate is, and also why sometimes it takes, people think there's a will, therefore, well, they'll just read the will and then there's the money, everything's sold, all the assets are there, it's all in the bank, right? Okay, so write out a check, and then someone like yourself says, I'm ever so sorry, but it's in probate. What does that mean? What's going on?
Yes, of course, probate. So every estate, so when anybody dies, there is a process to go through, whether you have a will or not. So, and unfortunately, when even if you do have a will, it's likely, not always, but in most typical situations, you would need to apply for what we call a grant of probate. But it's a whole process. So administrating an estate is, there are so many different steps. So you actually start with, so dealing with the practical things, so registering the death, for example, and then of course you would be arranging the funeral. And then after that, it's establishing what assets the person had. So you need to work out all of their bank accounts, their money, what property they had, their personal possessions. And then from there, you're then working out, do we need to pay any inheritance tax? From there, you then apply for the grant of probate, which is the probate process. After that, there are other steps to do. So once you actually receive and you've got the probate, you are then you are coming to the final stages, but you're having to account for the estate. So usually you would do what we call estate accounts. So setting out all your assets, all your liabilities. You're then dealing with HMRC, and then you're dealing with the beneficiaries. So you're eventually getting to the point to distribute the estate. So unfortunately, it is a long process, and there's quite a lot involved because of these different steps. So before you can even get to probate, there is a lot to do before then. So
I mean, one example of that, I mean, I think in today's world, one of the biggest complexities is years ago, you'd go into, for example, the bank. So you go into the bank, so I'm the solicitor, I'm representing a such and such a client, and you walk into the bank, you see the bank manager, he says, oh, yes, I'll pull up their accounts, and da, da, da. Yes, they've got X amount of money here, da, 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 da. There's the information. Today, everything is online, everything is password protected, there's multiple layers, and you've got to make sure that there's no fraud involved, that the solicitor is who they say they are. There must be so many background checks because, for example, even the husband or the wife won't know all the individual accounts, maybe even that person's got. They won't know all the log-on details because none of that stuff's going to be written down. Most of it's inside someone's head.
But I heard recently someone had this issue. I think I was in the bank actually, and there was a situation that the wife couldn't access. That was the third time she's going back to the bank. She can't access the husband who passed away account. And I just overheard the conversation. I was on the next one, but it makes me to think like, wow, obviously if you have a will, this as well makes the things easier. You give them, these are probably the little key points that you speak about.
These are the things you're doing in the background.
Yeah, exactly. So, just picking up on the point about bank accounts and assets, when you make your will, it's a good opportunity to record what you've got. Do a spreadsheet or write something out. So you've got a central list of all of your assets, all of your bank accounts. And as and when that changes, you can update it. So that's again an important part of the will making process, which again not everybody will do unless you're doing it with a professional. But it is a challenge nowadays. I think again, even in the time I've been doing probate work, how we notify banks, a lot of it, as you say, is online. Sometimes that can help, but sometimes it is a challenge. Even going into a bank nowadays is difficult because there's all these different rules. And unfortunately, what we tend to find is not all banks will necessarily understand what the process should be. They also have their own rules. So that feeds into the time element and why it takes a long time, because you're dealing with lots of different people, lots of companies. So, yes, absolutely, without a doubt, having a will make it easier, but there is a process you have to follow, even if you do have a will, in order to tie someone's estate up when they die.
I mean, I guess it's a case-by-case basis, but like on a simple case, I guess it's a few months to sort out, maybe. But on some cases, it must take 2 or 3 years to sort out, surely, because like you said, the complexity. And if you were even a complex, for example, with, I guess, someone who's got multiple businesses, the amount of assets and how you sort that out, that must really take a long time. I can't imagine how long that would take to sort out.
A very long time. It can be years. I've had estates which have gone on for over 2 or 3 years. Wow. I've known ones that have been a lot longer.
Wow.
I remember seeing one report of a probate going on for 10 years. So yes, it can be a very long time. And add to that is unfortunately what's happened recently. Well, not that recently, but over the last 5 and 6 years, and which has been impacted on from 2020 onwards. So with COVID, is that the probate registry, who deals with the probate side, they take a lot longer nowadays to issue the grants of probate. So that's having an impact upon time as well. So the average is 16 weeks. It used to be two weeks, but it can be a lot longer.
Wow.
Again, there are cases where people haven't had the probate for a year plus. So we've
So is this another area where there's a big skill set? So like for any younger people listening in and sort of thinking, wow, it's an area. I mean, so probate in itself and working in that particular section, there must be a huge demand potentially for people either working in the background in probate or on the legal side of probate. There must be a big demand, because if there's a huge backlog, and at the end of the day, as our population grows in across the world, and obviously in this country, but across the world, then more people being born, more people dying. Obviously, the demand for people in this particular specialist area must be a huge opportunity for people, and quite an interesting, from what we were just been saying, it must be fascinating working in that particular space.
It is. It's very fascinating, and you're right. There is a gap, I believe. There's still a shortage of lawyers and people doing this area of law. So for anybody wanting to go into the law, wills and probate, such a fascinating and interesting area. So I would definitely encourage it, because we do need more people entering this area of law. And I hope that the lawyers, our future lawyers, do consider it, because it's so interesting.
Excellent, Scott. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I personally learned quite a lot from you, and I'm sure we're going to learn more. We're going to meet again. Thank you very much for making the time, and for all this interesting information given to us.
Oh, no problem at all. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I've really enjoyed talking to you both.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Thanks very much. And thank you for everyone listening to us today. We hope you found it really interesting, and we've all learned a lot about the legal side, particularly, and the very important point about writing a will and understanding a little bit about probate. So that's hopefully really fascinating for us all. And anyone who is listening, if you're listening on YouTube, please do give us a like. And if you're not already, please do subscribe to our channel. And if you're listening on Spotify, again, please do follow us. It would really help us. Thank you very much for your time today. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to sharing with you next time.